Please note, this is a re-edit of my original video. The original video contained clips from the Dave Chappelle show, and was blocked by YouTube due to copyright. I have now replaced these clips with additional dialogue. Greetings YouTube. Bane666 here. Recently, while engaging in debates with feminists on YouTube, I have been told that MRA are against men, or homophobic. When I have inquired how they could possibly come to that conclusion, their response is always that the use of the word mangina is derogatory towards men and or homosexuals. So I thought I would do a video exploring my opinion of what a mangina is, why they are harmful to men's rights and equality, and how, ultimately, they are victims themselves. I guess the best way to start this video is with an analogy. I do not know how many of you are familiar with Dave Chappelle's show from last decade, but the very first episode contained a comedy skit about a man named Clayton Bigsby. Clayton Bigsby was a character that appeared on the very first episode of the Chappelle show. He was a blind African American, but was raised in an all-white orphanage to believe that he was white. This false belief led him to become a very successful author of anti-black, racist books, and he quickly became a leading member of the white supremacy movement, with only a small number of people aware of his actual race. Bigsby had a deep hatred of blacks, based on a lifetime of lies, the whole time totally unaware of his reality. Clayton Bigsby is a man who has been lied to, he has been deceived and fed lies, and is blind, in this case both literally and figuratively, to reality. He has been taught that who and what he really is both wrong and harmful. This to me is the perfect analogy for manginas. They have been deceived into thinking that masculinity is toxic and harmful. Now before I go on, let me be clear that I am not in any way saying that to be a real man you have to play football, sleep with as many women as possible and eat raw meat for breakfast. I really do not care if you are straight, gay or bi, that's not my business or concern. Nor do I care if you are a stereotypical jock, or a stereotypical nerd, if you are macho or effeminate. I really do not care, it really is not any of my business one way or another. But what does concern me, what does piss me off, is the notion that masculinity is toxic, and is responsible for all the evil in the world from the beginning of time.
Throughout history, men have raped and abused you, burned you at the stake, bought and sold your bodies for sexual pleasure,
barred you from religious and political office,
relegated you to subservient chores,
forced you to hide your faces, and even cut off your organs of sexual pleasure.
I may not have done these things myself,
but I'm aware of the forces of the unconscious masculine psyche that feel threatened by and then seek to dominate the feminine.
The message is clear. Just as Clayton Bigsby was convinced that African Americans have done nothing but wrong, and whites have done nothing but good, so these men have been convinced that the masculine is destructive and oppressive, and femininity is nothing but love and understanding. In both cases, these worldviews are limited, and bigoted, and ignore that both white and black, both male and female, are capable of both good and evil.
We feel deep love, great respect, and a growing sense of worship for the gifts of the feminine. We also feel deep sorrow about the destructive actions of the unconscious masculine in the past and present.
Here we are told that femininity should be worshipped, but masculinity is destructive and unconscious. Femininity is made to sound like a goddess generously giving out her gifts, while masculinity is made to sound like a hurricane, nothing more than a destructive force of nature. Let me ask you a simple question. How can we have gender equality when one gender teaches the other to hate itself? To me that sounds like an abusive relationship.
Many of the men who have oppressed and abused you are no longer alive.
Among the living, many men may not be able to apologize because they remain shackled in a prison of anger, fear, and shame.
On behalf of my gender, I apologize to you
for our unconscious actions when we were angry, scared, and in the grip of destructive forces in our psyche.
I choose to no longer contribute to those forces, nor to be run by them in my own life.
I offer you this apology in the hope that we can make a fresh start in the spirit of co-creation.
So do we really need to be slaves to that same innate biology that compels us to fuck anything we see and defecate in the corner. Didn't think so.
We want to apologize and make amends for those actions today so that we can move forward together into a new era of co-creation.
Ultimately, the masculinity construct is a somewhat reductive and repressive tool which is used to normalize certain behaviors over others for many reasons, not least to legitimize the parallel construction of female identity and therefore continue the oppressive treatment of women.
As men, our relationship to our planet and its resources has often been motivated by competition, acquisition, and domination.
We mistakenly believed that expansion would protect us from encroachment.
And in the process, we violated
the sanctity of the earth
and disturbed its natural rhythms.
I feel sorrow that men have used your beauty as a form of commerce in prostitution and pornography.
In the grip of lust, we have often lacked the skills to ask gracefully for intimacy or take no for an answer.
I take a stand against any form of enforced or soulless commercialization of women's beauty, and I respect that your body belongs to you.
I honor your capacity for peaceful resolution of conflicts,
your ability to apologize and to forgive with grace.
We men have waged endless wars over our disagreements.
In the act of defending our lands and protecting our families, we become addicted to the fight itself.
By contrast, it is rare to find an invasion or war instigated by a woman.
I apologize for dragging you into these wars.
For the rape, murder, broken hearts, and damaged families that these wars have resulted in.
Yes, it is true that in the past males have started the majority of wars, just as males have been responsible for the majority of scientific discoveries. The explanation for this is a simple one. It's that of opportunity. Just as women, when given the opportunity to partake in education and science, have been responsible for scientific discoveries, so have women proven that when given leadership roles they are capable of war and violence. Anyone who thinks that females are incapable of horrendous acts of inhumanity should look into the history of Pauline Nyiramasuhuko. She was a Rwandan politician who was the Minister for Family Welfare and the Advancement of Women. Following the Rwandan genocide of 1994, she was tried for genocide and incitement to rape as part of the Butari Group at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. She was convicted of 7 charges and sentenced to life in prison. I once brought her name up to a feminist who was arguing that only war crimes are committed by men. The feminist explained that Pauline's crimes were the result of a male-dominant patriarchal society, and that Pauline could not be totally held responsible for her crimes. Once again we have the cognitive dissonance that gives rise to the concept of males are always guilty, even when a female clearly commits the crime. I believe both genders are capable of good and evil, are capable of both creativity and destruction. Yet much of feminism seems to be about creating the concept of femininity being only loving, caring, creative, and understanding. And masculinity is destructive, brutish, harmful, and toxic.
Jacqueline, talk about what you've been writing about right now.
Well, I really see this case as an extreme example of a pervasive dynamic in our culture, which is one of toxic masculinity. It's our dominant construction of masculinity, and it really expresses itself as masculinity constructed as power over women, women being dehumanized, being sort of things for use by men for pleasure or other purposes. So it's really easy to focus on this guy as a monster and an outlier, but it really expresses something that we see all over the culture, which is men trained to think that the way to be a man is to have power over and to dehumanize women. Well, I mean, the military is the ultimate power over masculine structure. It goes back to toxic masculinity and total impunity for rapists. We know that when people come forward and do bring rape charges, we know most rapes are not reported, right? When they are reported, we know they're very unlikely to be prosecuted when compared with other violent crimes. And we know that even when they are prosecuted, we know they're very unlikely to result in convictions. That happens within the military. It happens outside the military. And that's why sexual violence is a pandemic in this country and elsewhere. And until we end impunity, and I want to say something about that, we need to create police or other justice structures that communities trust, right? So just saying more policing, better policing, absolutely, but you also have to think about, what about an undocumented immigrant who's been raped? What about communities and individuals who, for great reasons, who don't trust the police? We need much better justice structures. We need to take this as a priority, as a culture. If we prioritized women's safety as a culture, if we prioritized ending sexual violence, we would be pouring massive resources into this. We do into the drone program, right? So where are the resources being poured into solving this problem?
I find it interesting that she thinks that we should prioritize women's safety, as opposed to making it safer for everyone, and that out of the groups she mentioned afraid to come forward to the police to report a rape, she conveniently left out men, a group of victims who are almost universally ignored, disbelieved or made fun of. But that should not be surprising considering it comes from someone describing masculinity as toxic. Now let me introduce to you a perfect example of a mangina. His name is Clayton.
That's the Y chromosome. It's broken.
There is one thing that the psychology does. There's some reasonable evidence that there are gender differences. I mean, we're saying, but there are gender differences. One of the most important gender differences, in other words, males versus females, do not overlap that much at all in certain areas. And one place they don't overlap at all, and you can't change this with culture much. Like, you can change spatial orientation by giving everyone Tetris when they're born, and then they'll all be the same. What we can't change is that, for example, the number of kids that can't read until much later, the age at which you start to read, and how you have dyslexia and so on, that are boys, is an order of magnitude higher than for girls. And you can do everything you want to fix that. It's still, you can only fix it a little bit. Most of those differences disappear, and they're not necessarily that significant, but it's real. And there are, the human brain is a female brain that has been damaged by testosterone at various stages in his life. And I think there are probably some really interesting adult differences that are not, you can't look at a person and say this, but population differences between males and females that have to do with brain development because of hormonal differences. And most of them are probably kind of trivial, but there probably are some. And autism, yeah, I don't think that's an example of one, but there probably are some things like that. But mostly there are things that, if things were that different, if we were that different, we'd have a hard time communicating, and things would be like they say in the 1950s and stuff. Actually,
So, according to Clayton, testosterone, the very thing that makes a male, damages the human brain. And this is his explanation of why boys are presently failing in education. But might there be a more reasonable explanation?
And increasingly, our schools are failing to make a distinction between aggression and high-spirited play. And so little boys, almost the day they enter school, exist in a kind of milieu of disapproval. And it's very sad, because education has never been more important to a young person's prospects, and today girls are so much stronger educationally, and boys are languishing.
Well, Christina, let's talk about these little boys, because as you point out, boys are 4.5 times more likely to be suspended, which obviously lowers their chances of graduation from high school by 17%. And you say this is in part because of the zero tolerance policy and the lack of research. And this starts at an early age, at even kindergarten, where they're getting graded on how they act. So I guess I'm just wondering, is this just boys behaving badly, as we know they do, or is this really about stricter policies in place?
I think it's about sort of pathologizing normal behavior. I mean, take something like playing tag. This has been outlawed in many schools, or dodgeball, or there are schools that say we should change tug of war to tug of peace. Well, little boys don't take that well to these changes, and they as I said, their natural play is that high-spirited sort of mock fighting, this is disallowed, but this is what's worse. In their imaginative writing, in their narrative play, little boys in preschool and kindergarten will engage in fantasy play with superheroes and rescuing good guys and killing bad guys. There are many schools where this is forbidden, and they're punished and even suspended. So that's what I mean when they exist sort of under a cloud of disapproval.
I find it interesting that we are told by people like Clayton that gender is a social construct. That is until boys are the ones who are falling behind, and then suddenly it has nothing to do with a social construct heavily influenced by feminism, but is purely because males are naturally less than females.
Just like a male is a broken female, a dog is a broken wolf, but there's a lot of kinds of dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are the effects of convincing men and boys that they are broken females, that they are less than women, that they are toxic, moronic, and abusive by nature? I think this question can best be answered by a clip from a recent video by fellow YouTuber, The Bad Cop 69, where he talks about his own experiences.
My mother only ever really called herself a feminist. But growing up, all I ever heard out of her was how evil men are, how bad men are. And since my father had unfortunately killed himself due to many complications that need not be gotten into, I didn't have a male influence around, especially once my middle brother died, to be a counterbalance to that, to give me a balanced perspective. I quite literally grew up hating myself because I was a man, and because, based off of what I was hearing from dear old mom, I was only capable of doing bad things. That I should feel bad for having a penis because my penis is just the root of all evil. And I'm not joking about this. I really grew up hating myself for being a man. And I really was standoffish from other guys because I viewed them as an enemy to freedom, an enemy to people, an enemy to decency and morality in this country, quite literally. And where did this logically lead, you might ask? Why, it led to the mother, of my child. A woman who, when she beat me, which she did often, I thought, you know what, being a man, I deserve that. I deserve whatever she gives me. When she tried to kill me, I just put it off because I became a manservant, a literal manservant. My girl didn't need for anything because I was making up for all of mankind by being a butler to my ex. And for all my servitude, she tried to kill me not once but twice in my life, and wrote about a third time she contemplated doing it in my sleep. I subverted myself for her because I thought that that's all I was good for if I was going to be a different kind of man. If I was going to be a good man, a moral man, if I was going to make my mom happy, if I was going to show her that not all men are evil, sexist, cheating, wife-beating pigs, by taking the beatings, by being subservient, by never opening my mouth no matter how bad it got, or who it hurt, i.e. my son. And when she, as I've expressed in another video, when she was basically giving me the choice of have sex with her or get beaten, and I had nowhere to go, no one I could turn to, nobody I could even begin to talk about this, because remember, men don't get raped, men rape. Men don't get beaten. They're the aggressors. They're the only ones who are willing to beat, and it's barbaric if they ever beat a woman or even lay a hand on a woman, because we've got such manly strength that it's not fair if a man strikes a woman because he's stronger. Yes, this is quite literally a good lot of what was drilled into my head, no matter how completely inaccurate this would be. Not that I'm saying it's right to beat a woman. I am saying, though, that just as a woman has no right to have hands laid on her by anyone, it is not right for a woman and should not be considered justice when a woman beats a man. I'm still this far out, almost almost 9 years out from my ex. I'm still dealing from the fallout of everything she visited upon me. Do you think I could get help? Do you think I could call the police and tell them I'm being raped? Do you think I could call the police and tell them I'm getting beat up? And so, for the longest time, I fought shedding any kind of feminism. I didn't realize what my mom had instilled in me. I didn't realize the falsehoods she'd instilled in me, the exaggerations at times, the subjective nature of a lot of the things that she imparted upon me, though I do believe that at least 80% of what she said was true. And what was visited upon my mom was nothing short of disgusting. I completely agree with that. That said, however, was it right that I grew up thinking that there's something wrong with me because I was born male? Is it right that I grew up hating myself because I happen to be unfortunately blessed with a penis? That I didn't trust other guys and didn't have a lot of guy friends because I thought men were horrible, evil, nasty people, and that only I, through my indoctrination, had the smarts and the ability to be a better man by basically making myself a forever submissive, no matter how bad it got, including rape. Because I thought that this would make things right, that this would balance the scales of injustice in the world that was visited upon women on a daily basis, that I would absolutely ignore my own problems because men don't have problems, because men don't get raped, they don't get molested, at least not by women, they don't get beaten, they don't get murdered by their female partners. No. It's all men. Men are the aggressors. Men are the rapists. Men are the harmers of women and have no ability to be anything else other than deviant, disgusting, subhuman beings.
I started this video with a clip from comedian Dave Chappelle. His character, Clayton Bigsby, was a blind African American who was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He had been convinced that he was white, and believed every negative stereotype possible about African Americans. Concepts like an African American joining the Klan, or a Jewish Nazi are humorous because they are so absurd. It's absurd to think that someone could join and support a group which hates and degrades them simply because of how they were born. Yet that is exactly what feminism has achieved. For decades now they have told us that females can do no wrong, and males can do no right. That female nature is loving and caring, while male nature is toxic and something to be ashamed of. That males are responsible for all the wrongs of the world, and that females are always their victims. Male sexuality is something dirty, wrong, and even unnatural in the eyes of some extremists, while female sexuality is natural and beautiful, and of course always used and oppressed by those evil men's. It claims to be about equality, while ignoring that both males and females are capable of both good and evil, and instead assigns moral stereotypes based on gender. And some men have been convinced of these lies, poisoned by this bigotry, and used as cannon fodder against other men. It is not a partnership, but an abusive relationship. And if anyone disagrees, they are told to check their privilege, which is just another way of saying, shut the fuck up. And of course, if males want to create their own groups to tackle male issues like male genital mutilation, male suicide levels, domestic violence against males, male victims of sexual assault, in particular those older women preying on male children, who are rarely prosecuted, let alone talked about, the injustice in the family court system, and many others. If males dare to try to form a group to try to tackle these issues, we are told that we are sexists, or racists, or pro-rape, or anti-female, or that men do not have issues, or men's issues are men's fault anyway, or just a blunt, shut the fuck up because feminism is working on these things for you.
Is a list of the things that we're working towards. Now, if you would shut the fuck up for the 50th billionth time, we agree on. These are things that we're agreeing on.
No. I won't shut the fuck up. I won't trust in a movement which teaches that masculinity is toxic, that excuses any and all bad behavior by females, that thinks of testosterone as a poison, that teaches men to hate themselves. Feminism is not an equality movement. Equality is not teaching one half of the partnership that they were born inferior. That is bigotry and abuse, pure and simple. And I for one refuse to be silenced by bigots. I think it's time feminism checked its own privilege. I think it's time feminism stopped the male hate. And if you happen to be a feminist who is about to write a message in my comments section explaining to me how not all feminists are like that, before you do that, before you explain to me how I am misinformed about feminism, maybe you should explain what you are doing to clean up the harmful messages propagated by your fellow feminists. Because if you are willing to ignore them, then you are also part of the problem. And guys, a simple message to all of you: do not drink the feminist poison Kool-Aid, it's nothing but venomous lies.
And finally, you'll be free to ask for and accept help when you're under stress or dealing with difficult situations in life, instead of listening to the social norms and conventions that tell you to suck it up and deal with it on your own.
Now, if you would shut the fuck up for the 50th billionth time, would shut the fuck up, would shut the fuck up, would shut the fuck up.